going to be a book that one of my friends suggested to me because he's just like he has been reading it, and the name of the book is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. I don't know what this book is about. I think it's kind of for young or teens, I don't know. But let's see how it goes. It must be a nice book. So, the author of the book is Mark Haddon. Let's start. Let's see how much time I spent reading the book. If you have any questions, well, feel free to write in the chat. I'm going to be reading out your messages. Okay, so contents. Oh god, this has like 233 chapters. Seems long, but I don't think it really is. About the book. Lots of things are mysteries, but that doesn't mean there isn't an answer to them. This is Christopher's murder mystery story. There are also no lies in this story because Christopher can't tell lies. Christopher does not like strangers or the colors yellow or brown or being touched. On the other hand, he knows all the countries in the world and their capital cities and every prime number up to 7,507. When Christopher decides to find out who killed the neighbor's dog, his mystery story becomes more complicated than he would have ever predicted. Backstory. Read an interview with the author Mark Haddon and learn about the background to Christopher's story. The background of Christopher's story. Now I want to know what's that background. This book is dedicated to SOS or SOS. That's weird. With thanks to Catherine Heyman, Claire Alexander, Kate Shaw, and Dave Cohen. Okay. So we are going to read Mark Haddon's The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time. Okay. So this is weird because it seems that this book starts in chapter 2. And if I'm not wrong, the chapters are even numbers. Oh no, they are not even numbers, but they follow a strange succession. Oh, it's prime numbers. Each chapter is a prime number. Interesting. So first chapter is chapter 2, then 3, then 5, then 7, then 11. Interesting. So each chapter is a prime number. So the first chapter is chapter 2. So this starts interesting. But I fear that if this is just like how the book is structured, then I can't even imagine the contents. And I'm not very like I'm a little sleepy. Okay, let's start. Chapter 2. It was 7 minutes after midnight. The dog was lying on the grass in the middle of the lawn in front of Miss Cheer's house. Its eyes were closed. It looked as if it was running on its side, the way dogs run when they think they are chasing a cat in a dream. But the dog was not running or asleep. The dog was dead. There was a garden fork sticking out of the dog. The points of the fork must have gone all the way through the dog and into the ground because the fork had not fallen over. I decided that the dog was probably killed with the fork because I could not see any other wounds in the dog, and I do not think you would stick a garden fork into a dog after it had died for some other reason. Like cancer, for example, or a road accident, but I could not be certain about this. I went through Miss Cheer's gate, closing it behind me. I walked onto her lawn and knelt beside the dog. I put my hand on the muzzle of the dog. It was still warm. The dog was called Wellington. It belonged to Miss Cheers, who was our friend. She lived on the opposite side of the road, 2 houses to the left. Wellington was a poodle. Not one of the small poodles that have hairstyles, but a big poodle. It had curly black fur, but when you got close, you could see that the skin underneath the fur was a very pale yellow, like chicken. I stroked Wellington and wondered who had killed him and why. Chapter 3. My name is Christopher John Francis Boone. I know all the countries of the world and their capital cities and every prime number up to 7,507. 8 years ago, when I first met Siobhan, she showed me this picture. And it's a sad face picture. I'm sorry, this is reversed, but okay. And I knew that it meant sad, which is what I felt when I found the dead dog. Then she showed me this picture, and now it's a happy face. There you go, a happy face. And I knew that it meant happy, like when I'm reading about the Apollo space missions, or when I'm still awake at 3 or 4 in the morning and I can walk up and down the street and pretend that I am the only person in the whole world. Then she drew some other pictures. But I was unable to say what these meant. These ones. So yeah, surprised, like confused, like with plan, and another one. I got Siobhan to draw lots of these faces and then write down next to them exactly what they meant. I kept the piece of paper in my pocket and took it out when I didn't understand what someone was saying. But it was very difficult to decide which of the diagrams was most like the face they were making because people's faces move very quickly. When I told Siobhan that I was doing this, she got out a pencil and another piece of paper and said it probably made people feel very confused. And then she laughed. So I tore the original piece of paper up and threw it away. And Siobhan apologized. And now, if I don't know what someone is saying, I ask them what they mean, or I walk away. Chapter 5. I pulled the fork out of the dog and lifted him into my arms and hugged him. He was licking blood from the fork holes. I like dogs. You always know what a dog is thinking. It has 4 moods: happy, sad, cross, and concentrating. Also, dogs are faithful and they do not tell lies because they cannot talk. I had been hugging the dog for 4 minutes when I heard screaming. I looked up and saw Miss Shears running towards me from the patio. She was wearing pajamas and a housecoat. Her 2 nails were painted bright pink and she had no shoes on. She was shouting, "What in fuck's name have you done to my dog?" I do not like people shouting at me. It makes me scared that they are going to hit me or touch me, and I do not know what is going to happen. Let go of the dog, she shouted. Let go of the fucking dog, for Christ's sake. I put the dog down on the lawn and moved back 2 meters. She bent down. I thought she was going to pick the dog herself, but she didn't. Perhaps she noticed how much blood there was and didn't want to get dirty. Instead, she started screaming again. I put my hands over my ears and closed my eyes and rolled forward till I was hunched up with my forehead pressed onto the grass. The grass was wet and cold. It was nice. Okay. Chapter 7. This is a murder mystery novel. Siobhan said that I should write something I would want to read myself. Mostly, I read books about science and maths. I do not like proper novels. In proper novels, people say things like, "I am veined with iron, with silver, and with streaks of common mud. I cannot contract into the firm fist which those clench who do not spend on stimulus. What does this mean? I do not know, nor does Father, nor does Sioban or Mr. Jivens. I have asked them. Sioban has long blonde hair and wears glasses which are made of green plastic, and Mr. Jivens smells of soap and wears brown shoes that have approximately 60 tiny circular holes in each of them. But I do like murder mystery novels, so I am writing a murder mystery novel. In a murder mystery novel, someone has to work out who the murderer is and then catch them. It is a puzzle. If it is a good puzzle, you can sometimes work out the answer before the end of the book. Siobhan said that the book should begin with something to grab people's attention. This is why I started with the dog. I also started with the dog because it happened to me and I find it hard to imagine things which did not happen to me. Siobhan read the first page and said that it was different. She put this word into inverted commas by making the weekly quotation sign with her first and second fingers. She said that it was usually people who were killed in murder mystery novels. I said that 2 dogs were killed in The Hound of the Baskervilles. The Hound itself and James Mortimer Spaniel, but Siobhan said they weren't the victims of the murder, Sir Charles Baskerville was. She said that this was because readers cared more about people than dogs, so if a person was killed in the book, readers would want to carry on reading. I said that I wanted to write about something real and I knew people who had died, but I did not know any people who had been killed, except Edward's father from school, Mr. Paulson, and that was a gliding accident, not a murder, and I didn't really know him. I also said that I cared about dogs because they were faithful and honest, and some dogs were cleverer and more interesting than some people. Steve, for example, who comes to school on Thursdays, needs help to eat his food and could not even fetch a stick. Siobhan asked me not to say this to Steve's mother. Okay. The Hound of the Baskervilles. I haven't read that book, but I do love Sherlock Holmes stories. Okay, let's continue. Chapter 11. Then the police arrived. I like the police. They have uniforms and numbers, and you know what they are meant to be doing. There was a policewoman and a policeman. The policewoman had a little hole in her tights on her left ankle and a red scratch in the middle of the hole. The policeman had a big orange leaf stuck to the bottom of his shoe, which was poking out from one side. The policewoman put her arms round Miss Shears and led her back towards the house. I lifted my head off the grass. The policeman squatted down beside me and said, "Would you like to tell me what's going on here, young man?" I sat up and said, "The dog is dead." "I'd got that far," he said. I said, "I think someone killed the dog." "How old are you?" he asked. I replied, "I'm 15 years and 3 months and 2 days. "And what precisely were you doing in the garden?" he asked. "I was holding the dog," I replied. "And why were you holding the dog?" he asked. This was a difficult question. It was something I wanted to do. I like dogs. It made me sad to see that the dog was dead. I like policemen too, and I wanted to answer the question properly, but the policeman did not give me enough time to work out the correct answer. "Why were you holding the dog?" he asked again. "I like dogs," I said. "Did you kill the dog?" he asked. I said, "I did not kill the dog." "Is this your fork?" he asked. I said, "No." "You seem very upset about this," he said. He was asking too many questions and he was asking them too quickly. They were stacking up in my head like loaves in the factory where Uncle Terry works. The factory is a bakery and he operates the slicing machines. And sometimes the slicer is not working fast enough, but the bread keeps coming and there is a blockage. I sometimes think of my mind as a machine, but not always as a bread slicing machine. It makes it easier to explain to other people what is going on inside it. The policeman said, "I'm going to ask you once again." I rolled back onto the lawn and pressed my forehead to the ground again and made the noise that father calls groaning. I make this noise when there is too much information coming into my head from the outside world. It is like when you are upset and you hold the radio against your ear and you tune it halfway between 2 stations so that all you get is white noise, and then you turn the volume right up so that this all you can hear, and then you know you are safe because you cannot hear anything else. The policeman took hold of my arm and lifted me onto my feet. I didn't like him touching me like this, and this is when I hit him. Chapter 13. This will not be a funny book. I cannot tell jokes because I do not understand them. Here is a joke as an example. It is one of father's. His face was drawn, but the curtains were real. I know why this is meant to be funny, I asked. It is because drawn has three meanings, and they are 1. Drawn with a pencil, 2. Exhausted, and 3. Pulled across a window, and meaning 1 refers to both the face and the curtains. Meaning 2 refers only to the face, and meaning 3 refers only to the curtains. If I try to say the joke to myself, making the word mean the 3 different things at the same time, it is like hearing 3 different pieces of music at the same time, which is uncomfortable and confusing and not nice like white noise. It is like 3 people trying to talk to you at the same time about different things, and that is why there are no jokes in this book. Chapter 17. The policeman looked at me for a while without speaking. Then he said, I am arresting you for assaulting a police officer. This made me feel a lot calmer because it is what policemen say on television and in films. Then he said, I strongly advise you to get into the back of the police car because if you try any of that monkey business again, you little shit, I will seriously lose my rag. Is that understood? I walked over to the police car, which was parked just outside the gate. He opened the back door and I got inside. He climbed into the driver's seat and made a call on his radio to the policewoman who was still inside the house. He said, the little bugger just had a pop-up at me, Kate. Can you hang on with Miss S while I drop him off at the station? I'll get Tony to swing by and pick you up. And she said, sure, I'll catch you later. The policeman said, okay, Doc, okie dokie. And we drove off. The police car smelled of hot plastic and aftershave and takeaway chips. I watched the sky as we drove towards the town center. It was a clear night, and you could see the Milky Way. Some people think the Milky Way is a long line of stars, but it isn't. Our galaxy is a huge disk of stars, millions of light years across the solar system, is somewhere near the outside edge of the disk. And the solar system is somewhere near the outside edge of the disk. When you look in direction A at 90 degrees to the disk, you don't see many stars, but when you look in direction B, you see lots more stars because you are looking into the main body of the galaxy, and because the galaxy is a disk, you see a stripe of stars. And then I thought about how, for a long time, scientists were puzzled by the fact that the sky is dark at night, even though there are billions of stars in the universe, and there must be stars in every direction you look, so that the sky should be full of starlight because there is very little in the way to stop the light reaching Earth. That makes sense. The what? The sun. It's not clear, but it says the sun. Then they worked out that the universe was expanding, that the stars were all rushing away from one another after the Big Bang, and further the stars were away from us, the faster they were moving, some of them nearly as fast as the speed of light, which was why their light never reached us. I like this fact. It is something you can work out in your own mind just by looking at the sky above your head at night and thinking without having to ask anyone. And when the universe has finished exploding, all these stars will slow down, like a ball that has been thrown into the air. And they will come to a halt and they will all begin to fall towards the center of the universe again. And then there will be nothing to stop us seeing all stars in the world because they will all be moving towards us gradually faster and faster. And we will know that the world is going to end soon because when we look up into the sky at night, there will be no darkness, just the blazing light of billions and billions of stars, all falling. Except that no one will see this, because there will be no people left on the earth to see it. They will probably have become extinct by then. And even if there are people still in existence, they will not see it because the light will be so bright and hot that everyone will be burned to death, even if they live in tunnels. Yeah. But maybe the universe will never contract again. I'm not sure, right? No one's sure about that. It seems that's going to be the case, but who knows? I think it hasn't been proved yet. Has it? Chapter 19. Chapters in books are usually given the cardinal numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. But I have decided to give my chapters prime numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and so on because I like prime numbers. This is how you work out what prime numbers are. First, you write down all the positive whole numbers in the world. Then you take away all the numbers that are multiples of 2. Then you take away all the numbers that are multiples of 3. Then you take away all the numbers that are multiples of 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and so on. The numbers that are left are the prime numbers. The rule for working out prime numbers is really simple. There are some tables there, but I'll just skip them. But no one has ever worked out a simple formula for telling you whether a very big number is a prime number or what the next one will be. If a number is really, really big, it can take a computer years to work out whether it is a prime number. Prime numbers are useful for writing codes and in America, they are classed as military material, and if you find one over 100 digits long, you have to tell the CIA and they buy it off you for $10,000, but it will not be a very good way of making a living. Prime numbers are what is left when you have taken all the patterns away. I think prime numbers are like life. They are very logical, but you could never work out the rules, even if you spent all your time thinking about them. Chapter 23. When I got to the police station, they made me take the laces out of my shoes and empty my pockets at the front desk in case I had anything in them that I could use to kill myself or escape or attack a policeman with. The sergeant behind the desk had very hairy hands, and he had bitten his nails so much that they had bled. What? Again. The sergeant behind the desk had very hairy hands, and he had bitten his nails so much that they had bled. This is what I had in my pockets. 1. A Swiss Army knife with 13 attachments, including a wire stripper, and a saw and a toothpick and tweezers. 2. A piece of string. 3. A piece of wooden puzzle which looked like this. A wooden piece of puzzle which looked like that. 4. 3 pellets of rat food for Toby, my rat. He has a rat. 5. 1.47 pounds, I think it's called pounds, like the English money. This was made up of a pound coin, 2 penny coins, and 2 10-penny coins, a 5-penny coin, and a 2-penny coin. A red paper clip, that's this number 6, and 7, a key for the front door. I was also wearing my watch, and they wanted me to leave this at the desk as well, but I said that I needed to keep my watch on because I needed to know exactly what time it was. And when they tried to take it off me, I screamed, so they let me keep it on. They asked me if I had any familiar. I said I did. They asked me who my family was. I said it was father, but mother was dead. And I said it was also Uncle Terry, but he was in Sunderland, and he was father's brother. And it was my grandparents too, but 3 of them were dead, and Grandma Burton wasn't home because she had senile dementia and thought that I was someone on television. Then they asked me for my father's phone number. I told them that he had 2 numbers, one for at home, one which was a mobile phone, and I said both of them. It was nice in the police cell. It was almost a perfect cube, 2 meters long by 2 meters wide by 2 meters high. It contained approximately 8 cubic meters of air. It had a small window with bars and, on the opposite side, a metal door with a long, thin hatch near the floor for sliding trays of food into the cell, and the sliding hatch higher up so that policemen could look in and check that prisoners hadn't escaped or committed suicide. There was also a padded bench. I wonder how I would escape if I was in a story. It would be difficult because the only things I had were my clothes and my shoes, which had no laces in them. I decided that my best plan would be to wait for a really sunny day and then use my glasses to focus the sunlight on a piece of my clothing and start a fire. I would then make my escape when they saw the smoke and took me out of the cell. And if they didn't notice, I would be able to wee on the clothes and put them out. I wonder whether Miss Shears had told the police that I had killed Wellington and whether, when the police found out that she had lied, she would go to prison, because telling lies about people is called slander. So I know that he is a special boy, but it's hard to grasp that he is not very empathic, right? It's like as if that final paragraph was telling us that he really wants her to be in prison. But maybe he's just saying that it that way because it's like the law, the rules. Okay, interesting. That must say a lot about his father and maybe the what he remembers about his mother. Let's keep reading. Chapter 29. I find people confusing. This is for two main reasons. The first main reason is that people do a lot of talking without using any words. Siobhan says that if you raise one eyebrow, it can mean lots of different things. It can mean, I want to do sex with you, and I can also mean, I think that what you just said was very stupid. Siobhan also says that if you close your mouth and breathe out loudly through your nose, it can mean that you are relaxed, or that you are bored, or that you are angry, and it all depends on how much air comes out of your nose and how fast and what shape your mouth is when you do it, and how you are sitting and what you said just before, and hundreds of other things which are too complicated to work out in a few seconds. The second main reason is that people often talk using metaphors. These are examples of metaphors. I laughed my socks off. He was the apple of her eye. They had a skeleton in the cupboard. We had a real pig of a day. The dog was stone deaf. The word metaphor means carrying something from one place to another, and it comes from the Greek words meta, which means from one place to another, and fere, my Greek is obsolete, which means to carry, metaphor. Okay, and it is when you describe something by using a word for something that it isn't. This means that the word metaphor is a metaphor. I wanted you to see the Greek letters. So, what? So this is one, right? And, okay. For Greek word, meta, and here we must say for, but it's all mirrored. Sorry about that. Next time I will think about a way to mirror these letters. I think it should be called a lie, because a pig is not like a day, and people do not have skeletons in their cupboards, and when I try and make a picture of the phrase in my head, it just confuses me because imagining an apple in someone's eye doesn't have anything to do with liking someone a lot, and it makes you forget what the person was talking about. My name is a metaphor. It means carrying Christ, and it comes from the Greek words xro, which means Jesus Christ, and fere, And it was the name given to Saint Christopher because he carried Jesus Christ across a river. Christoph, Christoph, Christo. Okay. This makes you wonder what he was called before he carried Christ across the river. But he wasn't called anything because this is an apocryphal story, which means that it is a lie too. Apocryphal story. Mother used to say that it meant Christopher was a nice name because it was a story about being kind and helpful. But I do not want my name to mean a story about being kind and helpful. I want my name to mean me. Chapter 41. It was 1 and 12 a.m. when Father arrived at the police station. I did not see him until 1:28 a.m. But I knew he was there because I could hear him. He was shouting, "I want to see my son, and why the hell is he locked up?" And, "Of course I'm bloody angry. Then I heard the policeman telling him to calm down. Then I heard nothing for a long while. At 1:28 a.m. a policeman opened the door of the cell and told me that there was someone to see me. I stepped outside. Father was standing in the corridor. He held up his right hand and spread his fingers out in a fan. I held up my left hand and spread my fingers out in a fan, and we made our fingers and thumbs touch each other. We do this because sometimes Father wants to give me a hug, but I do not like hugging people, so we do this instead. And it means that he loves me. Then the policeman told us to follow him down the corridor to another room. In the room was a table and 3 chairs. He told us to sit down on the far side of the table, and he sat down on the other side. There was a tape recorder on the table, and I asked whether I was going to be interviewed, and he was going to record the interview. He said, "I don't think there will be any need for that." He was an inspector. I could tell because he wasn't wearing a uniform. He also had a very hairy nose. It looked as if there were 2 very small mice hiding in his nostrils. I hope you don't think I have mice in my nostrils. He said, "I have spoken to your father, and he says that you didn't mean to hit the policeman." I didn't say anything because this wasn't a question. He said, "Did you mean to hit the policeman?" I said, "Yes." He squeezed his face and said, "But you didn't mean to hurt the policeman." I thought about this and said, "No, I didn't mean to hurt the policeman. I just wanted him to stop touching me." Then he said, "You know that it is wrong to hit a policeman, don't you?" I said, "I do." He was quiet for a few seconds, then he asked, "Did you kill the dog, Christopher?" I said, "I didn't kill the dog." He said, "Do you know that it is wrong to lie to a policeman and that you can get into a very great deal of trouble if you do?" I said, "Yes." He said, "So do you know who killed the dog?" I said, "No." He said, "Are you telling the truth?" I said, "Yes, I always tell the truth." And he said, "Right, I am going to give you a caution." I asked, "Is that going to be on a piece of paper like certificate I can keep?" He replied, "No, a caution is that we are going to keep a record of what you did, that you hit a policeman but that it was an accident and that you didn't mean to hurt the policeman." I said, "But it wasn't an accident." And Father said, "Christopher, please." The policeman closed his mouth and breathed out loudly through out his nose and said, "If you get into any more trouble, we will take out this record and see that you have been given a caution, and we will take things much more seriously. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I said that I understood. Then he said that we could go, and he stood up and opened the door, and we walked out into the corridor and back to the front desk, where I picked up my Swiss Army knife and my piece of string and a piece of wooden puzzle and the 3 pellets of rat food for Toby and my 1.47 pounds and the paperclip and my front door key, which were all in a little plastic bag, and we went out to Father's car, which was parked outside, and we drove home. I hate that he doesn't use any commas. So he has this note at the end. It says, "This is not a metaphor, it is a smile," which means that it really did look like there were 2 very small mice hiding in his nostrils. And if you make a picture in your head of a man with 2 very small mice hiding in his nostrils, you will know what the police inspector looked like. And the smile is not a lie, unless it is a bad smile. Chapter 37. I do not tell lies. Mother used to say that this was because I was a good person. But it is not because I am a good person, it is because I can't tell lies. Mother was a small person who smelled nice, and she sometimes wore a fleece with a zip down the front which was pink, and it had a tiny label which said Bergos, Berghaus, on the left bosom. A lie is when you say something happened which didn't happen, but there is only ever one thing which happened at a particular time and a particular place. And there are an infinite numbers of things which didn't happen at the time and that place. And if I think about something which didn't happen, I start thinking about all the other things which didn't happen. For example, this morning for breakfast I had ready bread and some hot raspberry milkshake. But if I say that I actually had shreddies and a mug of tea, I start thinking about Cocoa Pops and lemonade and porridge and Dr. Pepper and how I wasn't eating my breakfast in Egypt and there wasn't a rhinoceros in the room and father wasn't wearing a diving suit and so on. And even writing this makes me feel shaky and scared, like I do when I'm standing on the top of a very tall building and there are thousands of houses and cars and people below me and my head is so full of all these things that I am afraid that I'm going to forget to stand up straight and hang onto the rail and I'm going to fall over and be killed. This is another reason why I don't like proper novels, because they are lies about things which didn't happen and they make me feel shaky and scared. And this is why everything I have written here is true. But I wouldn't have shreddies and tea because they are both brown. Chapter 41. 3 were clouds in the sky on the way home, so I couldn't see the Milky Way. 3. I'm sorry. There were clouds in the sky on the way home, so I couldn't see the Milky Way. I said, I'm sorry, because father had to come to the police station, which was a bad thing. He said, it's okay. I said, I didn't kill the dog. And he said, I know. Then he said, Christopher, you have to stay out of trouble, okay? I said, I didn't know I was going to get in trouble. I like Wellington and I went to say hello to him, but I didn't know that someone had killed him. Father said, just try and keep your nose out of other people's business. I thought for a little and said, I'm going to find out who killed Wellington. And father said, were you listening to what I was saying, Christopher? I said, yes. I was listening to what you were saying, but when someone gets murdered, you have to find out who did it, so that they can be punished. And he said, it's a bloody dog, Christopher, a bloody dog. I replied, I think dogs are important too. He said, leave it. And I said, I wonder if the police will find out who killed him and punish the person. Then father banged the steering wheel with his fist and the car weaved a little bit across the dotted line in the middle of the road and he shouted, I said leave it, for God's sake. I could tell that he was angry because he was shouting, and I didn't want to make him angry, so I didn't say anything else until we got home. When we came in through the front door, I went into the kitchen and got a carrot for Toby, and I went upstairs, and I shut the door of my room, and I let Toby out and gave him the carrot. Then I turned my computer on and played 76 games of Minesweeper and did the expert version in 102 seconds, which was only 3 seconds of my best time, which was 99 seconds. At 2:07 a.m. I decided that I wanted to drink a orange squash before I brushed my teeth and got into bed, so I went downstairs to the kitchen. Father was sitting on the sofa watching snooker on the television and drinking whiskey. There were tears coming out of his eyes. I asked, are you sad about Wellington? He looked at me for a long time and sucked air in through his nose. Then he said, yes, Christopher, you could say that. You could very well say that. I decided to leave him alone because when I am sad, I want to be left alone, so I didn't say anything else. I just went into the kitchen and made my orange squash and took it back upstairs to my room. Chapter 43. Mother died 2 years ago. I came home from school one day and no one answered the door, so I went and found the secret key that we keep under a flower pot behind the kitchen door. I let myself into the house and carried on making the Airfix Sherman tank model I was building. An hour and a half later, father came home from work. He runs a business and he does heating maintenance and boiler repair with a man called Rodri, who is his employee. He knocked on the door of my room and opened it and asked whether I had seen Mother. I said that I hadn't seen her, and he went downstairs and started making some phone calls. I did not hear what he said. Then he came up to my room and said he had to go out for a while and he wasn't sure how long he will be. He said that if I needed anything I should call him on his mobile phone. He was away for 2.25 hours. When he came back, I went downstairs. He was sitting in the kitchen staring out of the back window down the garden to the pond and the corrugated iron fence and the top of the tower of the Church of Manstead Street, which looks like a castle because it is in Norman. Father said, I'm afraid you won't be seeing your mother for a while. He didn't look at me when he said this. He kept on looking through the window. Usually people look at you when they are talking to you. I know that they are working out what I'm thinking, but I can't tell what they are thinking. It is like being in a room with one-way mirror in a spy film. But this was nice, having Father speak to me but not look at me. I said, why not? He waited for a very long time, then he said, your mother has had to go into a hospital. Can we visit her? I asked, because I like hospitals. I like the uniforms and the machines. Father said, no. I said, why can't we? And he said, she needs rest. She needs to be on her own. I asked, is it a psychiatric hospital? And Father said, no. It's an ordinary hospital. She has a problem with her heart. I said we will need to take food to her because I knew that food in hospital was not very good. David from school, he went into hospital to have an operation on his leg to make his calf muscle longer so that he could walk better, and he hated the food, so his mother used to take meals in every day. Father waited for a long time again and said, I'll take some in to her during the day when you are at school, and I'll give it to the doctors and they can give it to your mom, okay? I said, but you can't cook. Father put his hands over his face and said, Christopher, look, I'll buy some ready-made stuff from Marks and Spencer's and take those in. She likes those. I said I will make her a get-well card because that is what you do for people when they are in hospital. Father said he will take it in the next day. Chapter 47. In the bus on the way to school next morning, we passed 4 red cars in a row, which meant that it was a good day. So I decided not to be sad about Wellington. Mr. Jevons, the psychologist at the school, once asked me why 4 red cars in a row made it a good day and 3 red cars in a row made it quite good day, and 5 red cars in a row made it a super good day, and why 4 yellow cars in a row made it a black day, which is a day when I don't speak to anyone and sit on my own reading books and don't eat my lunch and take no risks. He said that I was clearly a very logical person, so he was surprised that I should think like this because it wasn't very logical. I said that I liked things to be in a nice order, and one way of things being in a nice order was to be logical, especially if those things were numbers or an argument. But there were other ways of putting things in a nice order, and that was why I had good days and black days. And I said that some people who worked in an office came out of their house in the morning and saw that the sun was shining and it made them feel happy, or they saw that it was raining and it made them feel sad. But the only difference was the weather, and if they worked in an office, the weather didn't have anything to do with whether they had a good day or a bad day. I said that when Father got up in the morning, he always put his trousers on before he put his socks on. And it wasn't logical but he always did it that way because he liked things in a nice order too. Also, whenever he went upstairs, he went up 2 at a time, always starting with his right foot. Mr. Jevons said that I was a very clever boy. I said that I wasn't clever, I was just noticing how things were. And that wasn't clever, that was just being observant. Being clever was when you looked at how things were and used the evidence to work out something new, like the universe expanding or who committed a murder. Or if you see someone's name and you give each letter a value from 1 to 26, A equals 1, B equals 2, etc., and you add the numbers up in your head and you find that it makes a prime number, like Jesus Christ, or Scooby-Doo, or Sherlock Holmes, or Dr. Watson. Mr. Jevons asked me whether this made me feel safe, having things always in a nice order, and I said it did. Then he asked if I didn't like things changing, and I said I wouldn't mind things changing if I became an astronaut, for example, which is one of the biggest changes you can imagine, apart from becoming a girl or dying. He asked whether I wanted to become an astronaut, and I said I did. He said that it was very difficult to become an astronaut. I said that I knew. You had to become an officer in the Air Force, and you had to take lots of orders and be prepared to kill other human beings, and I couldn't take orders. Also, I didn't have 20/20 vision, which you need to be a pilot, but I said that you could still want something that is very unlikely to happen. Terry, who is the older brother of Francis, who is at the school, said I would only ever get a job collecting supermarket trolleys or cleaning out donkey shit at an animal sanctuary, and they didn't let spacers drive rockets that cost billions of pounds. When I told this to father, he said that Terry was jealous of my being cleverer than him, which was a stupid thing to think because we weren't in a competition, but Terry is stupid, so quoderat demonstrandum, which is in Latin for which is the thing that was going to be proved, which means thus it is proved. I'm not a spacer, which means spastic, not like Francis, who is a spacer. And even though I probably won't become an astronaut, I'm going to go to university and study mathematics or physics and mathematics, which is a joint honor school because I like mathematics and physics and I'm very good at them. But Terry won't go to the university. Father says Terry is most likely to end up in prison. Terry has a tattoo in his arm of a heart shape with a knife through the middle of it. But this is what is called a digression, and now I'm going to go back to the fact that it was a good day. Because it was a good day, I decided that I would try and find out who killed Wellington, because a good day is a day for projects and planning things. When I said this to Siobhan, she said, well, we're meant to be writing stories today, so why don't you write about finding Wellington and going to the police station? And that is when I started writing this. And Siobhan said that she will help me with the spelling and the grammar and the footnotes. Chapter 53. Mother died 2 weeks later. I had not been into the hospital to see her, but father had taken in lots of food from Marks and Spencer's. He said that she had been looking okay and seemed to be getting better. She had sent me lots of love and had me my get well card on the table beside her bed. Father said that she liked it very much. The card had pictures of cars on the front. It looked like this. Lots of cars. I did it with Miss Peters at school, who does art, and it was a lino cut, which is when you draw a picture on a piece of lino and Miss Peters cuts round the picture with a Stanley knife, and then you put ink into the lino and press it onto the paper, which is why all the cars look the same, because I did one car and pressed it onto the paper 9 times, and it was Miss Peters' idea to do lots of cars, which I liked. I colored all the cars in with red paint to make it a super good day for mother. Father said that she died of a heart attack and it wasn't expected. I said, what kind of heart attack? Because I was surprised. Mother was only 38 years old and her heart attacks usually happen to older people. And mother was very active and rode a bicycle and ate food which was healthy and high in fiber and low in saturated fat like chicken and vegetables and muesli. Father said that he didn't know what kind of heart attack she had and now wasn't the moment to be asking questions like that. I said that it was probably an aneurysm. A heart attack is when some of the muscles in the heart stop getting blood and die. There are two main types of heart attack. The first is an embolism, that is when a blood clot blocks one of the blood vessels taking blood to the muscles in the heart. And you can stop this happening by taking aspirin and eating fish, which is why Eskimos don't get this sort of heart attack, because they eat fish and fish stops their blood clotting. But if they cut themselves badly, they can bleed to death. But an aneurysm is when a blood vessel breaks and the blood doesn't get to the heart muscles because it is leaking. And some people get aneurysms just because there is a weak bit in their blood vessels, like Miss Hardisty, who lived At number 72 in our street, who had a weak pit in the blood vessels in her neck and died just because she turned her head round to reverse her car into a parking space. On the other hand, it could have been an embolism because your blood clots much more easily when you are lying down for a long time, like when you are in a hospital. Father said, "I'm sorry, Christopher, I'm really sorry." But it wasn't his fault. Then Mr. Shears, Miss Shears, came over and cooked soupe for us, and she was wearing sandals and jeans and a t-shirt which had the words windsurf and Corfu and the picture of a windsurfer on it. And father was sitting down and she stood next to him and held his head against her bosoms and said, "Come on, Ed, we're going to get you through this." And then she made us spaghetti and tomato sauce. And after dinner she played Scrabble with me and I beat her 247 points to 134. Chapter 59. I decided that I was going to find out who killed Wellington, even though father had told me to stay out of other people's business. This is because I do not always do what I'm told, and this is because when people tell you what to do, it is usually confusing and does not make sense. For example, people often say be quiet, but they don't tell you how long to be quiet for. Or you see a sign which says keep off the grass, but it should say keep off the grass around this sign, or keep off all the grass in this park, because there is lots of grass you are allowed to walk on. Also, people break rules all the time. For example, father often drives at over 30 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone, and sometimes he drives when he has been drinking, and often he doesn't wear his seatbelt when he is driving his van. And in the Bible it says, "You shall not kill." But there were the Crusades and 2 world wars and the Gulf War, and there were Christians killing people in all of them. Also, I don't know what father means when he says stays out of other people's business, because I do not know what he means by other people's business. Because I do lots of things with other people at school and in the shop and on the bus, and his job is going into other people's houses and fixing their boilers and their heating, and all of these things are other people's business. Siobhan understands. When she tells me not to do something, she tells me exactly what it is that I am not allowed to do, and I like this. For example, she once said, "You must never punch Sarah or hit her in any way, Christopher, even if she hits you first. If she does hit you again, move away from her and stand still and count from 1 to 50. Then come and tell me what she has done, or tell one of the other members of staff what she has done." Or for example, she once said, "If you want to go on the swings and there are already people on the swings, you must never push them off. You must ask them if you can have a go, and then you must wait until they have finished. But when other people tell you what you can't do, they don't do it like this." So I decide for myself what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. That evening, I went round to Miss Shears' house and knocked on the door and waited for her to answer it. When she opened the door, she was holding a mug of tea and she was wearing sheepskin slippers, and she had been watching a quiz program on the television because there was a television on, and I could hear someone saying, "The capital city of Venezuela is Maracas, Caracas, Bogota, or Georgetown," and I knew that it was Caracas. She said, "Christopher, I really don't think I want to see you right now." I said, "I didn't kill Wellington." And she replied, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I wanted to come and tell you that I didn't kill Wellington, and also I want to find out who killed him." Some of her tea spilled onto the carpet. I said, "Do you know who killed Wellington?" She didn't answer my question. She just said, "Goodbye, Christopher," and closed the door. Then I decided to do some detective work. I could see that she was watching me and waiting for me to leave because I could see her standing in her hall on the other side of the frosted glass in her front door. So I walked down the path and out of the garden. Then I turned round and saw that she wasn't standing in her hall any longer. I made sure that there was no one watching and climbed over the wall and walked down the side of the house into her back garden to the shed where she kept all her gardening tools. The shed was locked with a padlock and I couldn't go inside, so I walked round to the window in the side. Then I had some good luck. When I looked through the window, I could see a fork that looked exactly the same as the fork that had been sticking out of Wellington. It was lying on the bench by the window and it had been cleaned because there was no blood on the spikes. I could see some other tools as well, a spade and a rake and one of those long clippers people use for cutting branches which are too high to reach. And they all had the same green plastic handles like the fork. This meant that the fork belonged to Miss Cheers. Either that or it was a red herring, which is a clue which makes you come to a wrong conclusion, or something which looks like a clue but it isn't. I wondered if Miss Shears had killed Wellington herself. But if she had killed Wellington herself, why did she come out of the house shouting, "What in fuck's name have you done to my dog?" I thought that Miss Shears probably didn't kill Wellington, but whoever had killed him had probably killed him with Miss Shears' fork, and the shed was locked. This meant that it was someone who had the key to Miss Cheers' shed, or that she had left it unlocked, or that she had left her fork lying around in the garden. I heard the noise and turned round and saw Miss Cheers standing on the lawn looking at me. I said, "I came to see if the forks was in the shed." And she said, "If you don't go now, I'll call the police again." So I went home. When I got home, I said hello to father and went upstairs and fed Toby, my rat, and felt happy because I was being a detective and finding things out. Chapter 61. Miss Forbes at school said that when mother died she had gone to heaven. That was because Miss Forbes is very old and she believes in heaven. And she wears tracksuit trousers because she says that they are more comfortable than normal trousers. And one of her legs is very slightly shorter than the other one because of an accident on a motorbike. But when mother died, she didn't go to heaven because heaven doesn't exist. Miss Peters' husband is a vicar called the Reverend Peters, and he comes to our school sometimes to talk to us. And I asked him where heaven was, and he said, "It is not in our universe. It's another kind of place altogether." The Reverend Peters makes a funny ticking noise with his tongue sometimes when he's thinking. And he smokes cigarettes and you can smell them on his breath. And I don't like this. I said that there wasn't anything outside the universe and there wasn't another kind of place altogether. He said that there might be if you went through a black hole, but a black hole is what is called a singularity, which means it is impossible to find out what is on the other side because the gravity of a black hole is so big that even electromagnetic waves like light can't get out of it. And electromagnetic waves are how we get information about things which are far away. And if heaven was on the other side of a black hole, dead people will have to be fired into space on rockets to get there. And they aren't, or people would notice. I think people believe in heaven because they don't like the idea of dying, because they want to carry on living and they don't like the idea that other people will move into their house and put their things into the rubbish. The Reverend Peters said, "Well, when I say that heaven is outside the universe, it's really just a manner of speaking. I suppose what it really means is that they are with God." And I replied, "But where is God?" And the Reverend Peters said that we should talk about this on another day when he had more time. What actually happens when you die is that your brain stops working and your body rots, like Rabbit did when he died and we buried him in the earth at the bottom of the garden, and all his molecules were broken down into other molecules and they went into the earth and were eaten by worms and went into the plants, and if we go and dig in the same place, in 10 years there will be nothing except his skeleton left. And in 1,000 years, even his skeleton will be gone. But that is alright because he is a part of the flowers and the apple tree and the hawthorn bush now. When people die, they are sometimes put into coffins, which means they don't mix with the earth for a long time until the wood in the coffin rots. But mother was cremated. This means that she was put into a coffin and burnt and ground up and turned into ash, and smoke. I didn't know what happens to the ash, and I couldn't ask at the crematorium because I didn't go to the funeral. But the smoke goes out of the chimney and into the air, and sometimes I look up in the sky and I think that there were molecules of mother up there, or in the clouds over Africa, or the Antarctic, or coming down as rain in the rainforest in Brazil, or in the snow somewhere. Chapter 67. The next day was Saturday, and there is not much to do on a Saturday unless father takes me out somewhere on an outing to the boating lake or to the garden centre. But on this Saturday, England were playing Romania at football, which meant that we weren't going to go on an outing because father wanted to watch the match on the television. So I decided to do some more detection on my own. I decided that I would go and ask some of the other people who lived in our street if they had seen anything killing Wellington, or whether they had seen anything strange happening in the street on Thursday night. Talking to strangers is not something I usually do. I do not like talking to strangers. This is not because of a stranger danger, which they tell us about at school, which is where a strange man offers you sweets or a ride in his car because he wants to do sex with you. I am not worried about that. If a strange man touches me, I will hit him, and I can hit people very hard. For example, when I punched Sarah because she had pulled my hair, I knocked her unconscious, and she had concussion, and they had to take her to the accident and the emergency department at the hospital. And also, I always have my Swiss Army knife in my pocket, and it has a saw blade which could cut a man's fingers off. I do not like strangers because I do not like people I have never met before. They are hard to understand. It is like being in France, which is where we went on holiday sometimes when mother was alive to camp. And I hated it because if you went into a shop or a restaurant or on a beach, you couldn't understand what anyone was saying, which was frightening. It takes me a long time to get used to people I do not know. For example, when there is a new member of staff at school, I do not talk to them for weeks and weeks. I just watch them until I know that they are safe. Then I ask them questions about themselves, like whether they have pets and what is their favorite color and what do they know about the Apollo space missions, and I get them to draw a plan of their house, and I ask them what kind of car they drive, so I get to know them. Then I don't mind if I'm in the same room as them and don't have to watch them all the time. So talking to the other people in our street was brave, but if you are going to do detective work, you have to be brave, so I had no choice. First of all, I made a plan of our part of the street, which is called Randolph Street, like this. Okay. Then I made sure I had my Swiss Army knife in my pocket, and I went out and knocked on the door of number 40, which is opposite Miss Cheer's house, which means that they were most likely to have seen something. The people who live at number 40 are called Thompson. Mr. Thompson answered the door. He was wearing a t-shirt which said, "Beer, helping ugly people have sex for 2,000 years." Mr. Thompson said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Do you know who killed Wellington?" I did not look at his face. I do not like looking at people's faces, especially if they are strangers. He did not say anything for a few seconds. Then he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Christopher Boone from number 36, and I know you. You are Mr. Thompson." He said, "I'm Mr. Thompson's brother." I said, "Do you know who killed Wellington?" He said, "Who the fuck is Wellington?" I said, "Miss Cheer's dog. Miss Cheers is from number 41. He said, "Someone killed her dog?" I said, "With a fork." He said, "Jesus Christ." I said, "A garden fork," in case he thought I meant a fork you eat your food with. Then I said, "Do you know who killed him?" He said, "I haven't a bloody clue." I said, "Did you see anything suspicious on Thursday evening?" He said, "Look, son, do you really think you should be going around asking questions like this?" And I said, "Yes, because I want to find out who killed Wellington, and I'm writing a book about it." And he said, "Well, I was in Colchester on Thursday, so you're asking the wrong bloke." I said, "Thank you," and I walked away. There was no answer at house number 42. I had seen the people who lived at number 44, but I did not know what their names were. They were black people, and they were a man and a lady with two children, a boy and a girl. The lady answered the door. She was wearing boots, which looked like army boots, and there were 5 bracelets made out of a silver-colored metal on her wrist, and they made a jangling noise. She said, "It's Christopher, isn't it?" I said that it was, and I asked her if she knew who killed Wellington. She knew who Wellington was, so I didn't have to explain, and she had heard about him being killed. I asked if she had seen anything suspicious on Thursday evening which might be a clue. She said, "Like what?" And I said, "Like strangers or like the sound of people arguing." But she said she hadn't. And then I decided to do what is called trying a different tack, and I asked her whether she knew of anyone who might want to make Miss Shears sad. And she said, "Perhaps you should be talking to your father about this." And I explained that I couldn't ask my father because the investigation was a secret, because he had told me to stay out of other people's business. She said, "Well, maybe he has a point, Christopher." And I said, "So you don't know anything which might be clue?" And she said, "No." And then she said, "You be careful, young man." I said that I would be careful, and then I said thank you to her for helping me with my questions, and I went to number 43, which is the house next to Miss Shears' house. The people who live at number 43 are Mr. Wise and Mr. Wise's mother, who is in a wheelchair, which is why he lives with her, so he can take her to the shops and drive her around. It was Mr. Wise who answered the door. He smelled of body odor and old biscuits and of popcorn, which is what you smell of if you haven't washed for a very long time, like Jason at school smells because his family is poor. I asked Mr. Wise if he knew who had killed Wellington on Thursday night. He said, "Bloody hell, policemen really are getting younger, aren't they?" Then he laughed. I do not like people laughing at me, so I turned and walked away. I did not knock at the door of number 38, which is the house next to our house, because the people there take drugs and father says that I should never talk to them, so I don't. And they play loud music at night, and they make me scared sometimes when I see them in the street, and it's not really their house. Then I noticed that the old lady who lives at number 39, which is on the other side of Miss Cheer's house, was in her front garden, cutting her hedge with an electric hedge trimmer. Her name is Miss Alexander. She has a dog. It is a Dachshund, so she was probably a good person because she liked dogs, but the dog wasn't in the garden with her. It was inside the house. Miss Alexander was wearing jeans and training shoes which old people don't normally wear, and there was mud on the jeans, and the trainers were New Balance trainers, and the laces were red. I went up to Miss Alexander and said, "Do you know anything about Wellington being killed?" Then she turned the electric hedge trimmer off and said, "I'm afraid you are going to have to say that again. I'm a little deaf." So I said, "Do you know anything about Wellington being killed?" And she said, "I heard about it yesterday. Dreadful, dreadful." I said, "Do you know who killed him?" And she said, "No, I don't." I replied, "Somebody must know, because the person who killed Wellington knows that they killed Wellington. Unless they were a mad person and didn't know what they were doing, or unless they had amnesia." And she said, "Well, I suppose you're probably right." I said, "Thank you for helping me with my investigation." And she said, "You're Christopher, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I live at number 36. And she said, "We haven't talked before, have we?" I said, "No, I don't like talking to strangers, but I'm doing detective work." And she said, "I see you every day going to school." I didn't reply to this. And she said, "It's very nice of you to come and say hello." I didn't reply to this either because Miss Alexander was doing what is called chatting, where people say things to each other which aren't questions and answers and aren't connected. Then she said, "Even if it's only because you are doing detective work." And I said, "Thank you," again. And I was about to turn and walk away when she said, "I have a grandson your age." I tried to do chatting by saying, "My age is 15 years and 3 months and 3 days." And she said, "Well, almost your age." Then we said nothing for a little while until she said, "You don't have a dog, do you?" And I said, "No." She said, "You'd probably like a dog, wouldn't you?" And I said, I have a rat. And she said, a rat? And I said, he's called Toby. And she said, oh. And I said, most people don't like rats because they think they carry diseases like bubonic plague, but that's only because they lived in sewers and stowed away on ships coming from foreign countries where there were strange diseases. But rats are very clean. Toby is always washing himself. And you don't have to take him out for walks. I just let him run around my room so that he gets some exercise. And sometimes he sits on my shoulder or hides in my sleeve like it's a burrow. But rats don't live in burrows in nature. Miss Alexander said, do you want to come in for tea? And I said, I don't go into other people's houses. And she said, well, maybe I could bring some out here. Do you like lemon squash? I replied, I only like orange squash. And she said, luckily, I have some of that as well. And what about Battenberg? And I said, I don't know because I don't know what Battenberg is. She said, it's kind of a cake. It has 4 pink and yellow squares in the middle and it has marzipan icing around the edge. And I said, is it a long cake with a square cross-section which is divided into equally sized alternately colored squares? And she said, yes. I think you could probably describe it like that. I said, I think I like the pink squares but not the yellow squares because I don't like yellow. And I don't know what marzipan is, so I don't know whether I like that. And she said, I'm afraid marzipan is yellow too. Perhaps I should bring out some biscuits instead. Do you like biscuits? And I said, yes, some sorts of biscuits. Then she said, I'll get a selection. Then she turned and went into the house. She moved very slowly because she was an old lady and she was inside the house for more than 6 minutes. And I began to get nervous because I didn't know what she was doing in the house. I didn't know her well enough to know whether she was telling the truth about getting orange squash and Battenberg cake. And I thought she might be ringing the police and they'd get into much more serious trouble because of the caution. So I walked away. And as I was crossing the street, I had a stroke of inspiration about who might have killed Wellington. I was imagining a chain of reasoning inside my head, which was like this. 1. Why would you kill a dog? A. Because you hated the dog. B. Because you were mad. C. Because you wanted to make Miss Cheers upset. 2. I didn't know anyone who hated Wellington, so if it was A, it was probably a stranger. I didn't know any mad people, so if it was B, it was also probably a stranger. Most murderers are committed by someone who is known to the victim. In fact, you are most likely to be murdered by a member of your own family on Christmas Day. This is a fact. Wellington was therefore most likely to have been killed by someone known to him. 5. If it was C, I only knew one person who didn't like Miss Cheers, and that was Mr. Cheers, who knew Wellington very well indeed. This meant that Mr. Cheers was my prime suspect. Mr. Cheers used to be married to Miss Cheers and they lived together until 2 years ago. Then Mr. Cheers left and didn't come back. This was why Miss Cheers came over and did lots of cooking for us after Mother died, because she didn't have to cook for Mr. Cheers anymore, and she didn't have to stay at home and be his wife. And also Father said that she needed company and didn't want to be on her own. And sometimes Miss Cheers stayed overnight at our house, and I liked it when she did because she made things tidy and she arranged the jars and pans and tins in order of their height on the shelves in the kitchen, and she always made their labels face outwards, and she put the knives and forks and spoons in the correct compartments in the cutlery drawer. But she smoked cigarettes and she said lots of things I didn't understand. Example, Gracia, I'm going to hit the hay, and it's brass monkeys out there, and let's rustle up some tucker. And I didn't like it when she said things like that because I didn't know what she meant. And I don't know why Mr. Cheers left Mrs. Cheers because nobody told me. But when you get married, it is because you want to live together and have children. And if you get married in a church, you have to promise that you will stay together until death do us part. And if you don't want to live together, you have to get divorced, and this is because one of you has done sex with somebody else, or because you are having arguments and you hate each other, and you don't want to live in the same house anymore and have children. And Mr. Cheers didn't want to live in the same house as Miss Cheers anymore. So he probably hated her and he might have come back and killed her dog to make her sad. I decided to try and find out more about Mr. Cheers. Chapter 71. All the other children at my school are stupid, except I'm not meant to call them stupid, even though this is what they are. I meant to say that they have learning difficulties or that they have special needs, but this is stupid because everyone has learning difficulties, because learning to speak French or understanding relativity is difficult. And also everyone has special needs, like father who has to carry a little packet of artificial sweetening tablets around with him to put in his coffee to stop him getting fat, or Miss Peters who wears a beige-colored hearing aid, or Siboan who has glasses so thick that they give you a headache if you borrow them, and none of these people are special needs, even if they have special needs. But Siobhan said we have to use those words because people used to call children like the children at school spats and creep and monk, which were nasty words. But that is stupid too because sometimes the children from the school down the road see us in the street when we are getting off the bus and they shout special needs, but I don't take any notice because I don't listen to what other people say, and only sticks and stones can break my bones, and I have my Swiss Army knife if they hit me, and if I kill them, it will be self-defense and I won't go to prison. I'm going to prove that I'm not stupid. Next month, I'm going to take my A level in maths and I'm going to get an A grade. No one has ever taken an A level at our school before, and the headmistress, Miss Gascoigne, didn't want me to take it at first. She said they didn't have the facilities to let us sit A levels. But father had an argument with Miss Gascoigne and he got really cross. Miss Gascoigne said they didn't want to treat me differently from everyone else in the school because then everyone would want to be treated differently and it would set a precedent. And I could always do my A levels later, at 18. I was sitting in Miss Gascoigne's office with father, when she said these things, and father said, Christopher is getting a crap enough deal already, don't you think, without you shitting on him from a great height as well. Jesus, this is the one thing he's really good at. Then Miss Gascoigne said that she and father should talk about this at some later point on their own, but father asked her whether she wanted to say things she was embarrassed to say in front of me, and she said no, so he said, say them now then. And she said that if I sat an A level, I would have to have a member of staff looking after me on my own in a separate room. And father said he would pay someone £50 to do it after school, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer. And she said she'd go away and think about it. And the next week, she rang father at home and told him that I could take the A level, and the Reverend Peters will be what is called the invigilator. And after I've taken A-level maths, I am going to take a level further maths in physics, and then I can go to university. There is not a university in our town, which is Swindon, because it is a small place, so we will have to move to another town where there is a university because I don't want to live on my own or in a house with other students. But that will be alright because father wants to move to a different town as well. He sometimes says things like, we've got to get out of his town, kiddo. And sometimes he says, Swindon is the arsehole of the world. Then when I've got a degree in maths or physics and physics, I'll be able to get a job and earn lots of money, and I'll be able to pay someone who can look after me and cook my meals and wash my clothes, or I will get a lady to marry me and be my wife, and she can look after me so I can have company and not be on my own. Chapter 73. I used to think that mother and father might get divorced. That was because they had lots of arguments and sometimes they hated each other. This was because of the stress of looking after someone who has behavioral problems like I have. I used to have lots of behavioral problems, but I don't have so many now because I'm more grown up and I can take decisions for myself and do things on my own, like going out of the house and buying things at the shop at the end of the road. These are some of my behavioral problems. A. Not talking to people for a long time. B. Not eating or drinking anything for a long time. C. Not liking being touched. D. Screaming when I'm angry or confused. E. Not liking being in a really small places with other people. F. Smashing things when I am angry or confused. G. Groaning. H. Not liking yellow things or brown things and refusing to touch yellow things or brown things. I. Refusing to use my toothbrush if anyone else has touched it. J. Not eating food if different sorts of food are touching each other. K. Not noticing that people are angry with me. L. Not smiling. M. Saying things that other people think are rude. N. Doing stupid things. O. Hitting other people. P. Hating France. Q. Driving mother's car. R. Getting cross when someone has moved the furniture. Sometimes these things will make mother and father really angry and they will shout at me or they will shout at each other. Sometimes father will say, Christopher, if you do not behave, I swear I shall knock the living daylights out of you. Or mother will say, Jesus, Christopher, I'm seriously considering putting you in a home. Or mother will say, you are going to drive me into an early grave. Chapter 79. When I got home, father was sitting at the table in the kitchen and he had made me souper. He was wearing a lumberjack shirt. The souper was baked beans and broccoli and 2 slices of ham, and they were laid out on the plate so that they were not touching. He said, where have you been? And I said, I have been out. This is called a white lie. A white lie is not a lie at all. It is where you tell the truth, but you do not tell all of the truth. This means that everything you say is a white lie because when someone says, for example, what do you want to do today? You say, I want to do painting with Mrs. Peters. But you don't say, I want to have my lunch and I want to go to the toilet and I want to go home after school and I want to play with Toby and I want to have my souper and I want to play on my computer and I want to go to bed. And I said a white lie because I knew that father didn't want me to be a detective. Father said, I have just had a phone call from Miss Cheers. I started eating my baked beans and broccoli and 2 slices of ham. Then father asked, what the hell were you doing poking around her garden? I said, I was doing detective work trying to find out who killed Wellington. Father replied, how many times do I have to tell you, Christopher? The baked beans and the broccoli and the ham were cold, but I didn't mind this. I eat very slowly, so my food is nearly always cold. Father said, I told you to keep your nose out of other people's business. I said, I think Mr. Cheers probably killed Wellington. Father didn't say anything. I said, he is my prime suspect because I think someone might have killed Wellington to make Miss Cheers sad, and the murder is usually committed by someone unknown. Father banged the table with his fist really hard so that the plates and his knife and fork jumped around and my ham jumped sideways so that it touched the broccoli, so I couldn't eat the ham or the broccoli anymore. Then he shouted, I will not have that man's name mentioned in my house. I asked, why not? And he said, that man is evil. And I said, does that mean he might have killed Wellington? Father put his head in his hand and said, Jesus wept. I could see that father was angry with me, so I said, I know you told me not to get involved in other people's business, but Miss Cheers is a friend of ours. And father said, well, she's not a friend anymore. And I asked, why not? And father said, okay, Christopher, I'm going to say this for the last and final time. I will not tell you again. Look at me when I'm talking to you, for God's sake. Look at me. You are not to go asking Miss Cheers about who killed that bloody dog. You are not to go asking anyone about who killed that bloody dog. You are not to go trespassing in other people's gardens. You are to stop this ridiculous bloody detective game right now. I didn't say anything. Father said, I'm going to make you promise, Christopher, and you know what it means when I make you promise. I didn't know what it meant when you say you promise something. You have to say that you will never do something again, and then you must never do it because that will make the promise a lie. I said, I know. Father said, promise me you will stop doing these things. Promise that you will give up this ridiculous game right now, okay? I said, I promise. Chapter 83. I think I will make a very good astronaut. To be a good astronaut, you have to be intelligent, and I'm intelligent. You also have to understand how machines work, and I'm good at understanding how machines work. You also have to be someone who would like being on their own in a tiny spacecraft thousands and thousands of miles away from the surface of the Earth and not panic or get claustrophobia or homesick or insane. And I really like little spaces so long as there is no one else in with them with me. Sometimes when I want to be on my own, I get into the airing cupboard in the bathroom and slide in beside the boiler and pull the door closed behind me and sit there and think for hours and make me feel very calm. So I will have to be an astronaut on my own or have my own part of the spacecraft which no one else could come into. And also there are no yellow things or brown things in a spacecraft, so that will be okay too. And I will have to talk to other people from mission control, but we will do that through a radio link up and a TV monitor, so they wouldn't be like real people who are strangers, but it would be like playing a computer game. Also, I wouldn't be homesick at all because I'd be surrounded by lots of the things I like, which are machines and computers and outer space. And I will be able to look out of a little window in the spacecraft and know that there was no one else near me for thousands and thousands of miles, which is what I sometimes pretend at night in the summer when I go and lie on the lawn and look up at the sky and I put my hands around the sides of my face so that I can see the fence and the chimney and the washing line, and I can't pretend I'm in space. I can't pretend I'm in space. And all I could see will be stars, and stars are the places where the molecules that life is made of were constructed billions of years ago. For example, all the iron in your blood, which stops you being anemic, was made in a star. And I would like it if I could take Toby with me into space. And that might be allowed because they sometimes do take animals into space for experiments. So if I could think of a good experiment you could do with a rat that didn't hurt the rat, I could make them let me take Toby. But if they didn't let me, I will still go because it will be a dream come true. Chapter 89. The next day at school I told Siobhan that father had told me I couldn't do any more detecting, which meant that the book was finished. I showed her the pages I had written so far, with the diagram of the universe and the map of the street and the prime numbers, and she said that it didn't matter. She said the book was really good as it was, and that I should be very proud of having written a book at all, even if it was quite short, and there were some very good books which were very short. Hello, Chezit Muncher? Yes, I'm reading a book. It's about this boy that wants to solve a mystery. Uh, the dog was killed, so he wants to know who killed the dog. And the guy, the boy seems to have like, I don't know, like uh, issues with that has a special name, but I don't know the name. I mean, it's a special guy, a special boy. So yeah, it's interesting. Let's see. I should be very proud of having written a book at all, even if it was quite short, and there were some very good books which were very short, like Heart of Darkness, which was by Conrad. But I said that it wasn't a proper book because it didn't have a proper ending, because I never found out who killed Wellington, so the murder was still at large. And she said that was like life, and not all murders were solved, and not all murderers were caught, like Jack the Ripper. I said I didn't like the idea that the murder was still at large. I said I didn't like the think that the person who killed Wellington could be living somewhere nearby and I might meet him when I went out for a walk at night. And this was possible because a murder was usually committed by a person who was known to the victim. Then I said, Father said I was never to mention Mr. Cheers' name in our house again, and that he was an evil man, and maybe that meant he was the person who killed Wellington. And she said, perhaps your father just doesn't like Mr. Cheers very much. And I asked why, and she said, I don't know, Christopher. I don't know because I don't know anything about Mr. Cheers. I said, Mr. Cheers used to be married to Miss Cheers, and he left her, like in a divorce, but I don't know if they were actually divorced. And Siobhan said, well, Miss Cheers is a friend of yours, isn't she? A friend of you and your father, so perhaps your father doesn't like Mr. Cheers because he left Miss Cheers, because he did something bad to someone who is a friend. And I said, but father says Miss Cheers isn't a friend of ours anymore. And Siobhan said, I'm sorry, Christopher, I wish I could answer all these questions, but I simply don't know. Then the bell went for the end of school. The next day I saw 4 yellow cars in a row on the way to school, which made it a black day. So I didn't eat anything at lunch and I sat in the corner of the room all day and read my A-level maths course book. And the next day too, I saw 4 yellow cars in a row on the way to school, which made it another black day too. So I didn't speak to anyone, and for the whole afternoon I sat in the corner of the library groaning with my head pressed into the joint between the 2 walls, and this made me feel calm and safe. But on the 3rd day I kept my eyes closed all the way to school until we got off the bus, because after I have had 2 black days in a row, I'm allowed to do that. Okay. Chapter 97. But it wasn't the end of the book, because 5 days later I saw 5 red cars in a row, which made it a super good day. And I knew that something special was going to happen. Nothing special happened at school, so I knew something special was going to happen after school. And when I got home, I went down to the shop at the end of our road to buy some licorice laces and a Milky Bar with my pocket money. And when I had both my licorice laces and the Milky Bar, I turned round and saw Miss Alexander, the old lady from number 39, who was in the shop as well. She wasn't wearing jeans now, she was wearing a dress like a normal old lady, and she smelled of cooking. She said, "What happened to you the other day?" I asked, "Which day?" And she said, "I came out again and you'd gone. I had to eat all the biscuits myself." I said, "I went away." And she said, "I got it, Dad." I said, "I thought you might ring the police." And she said, "Why on earth would I do that?" And I said, "Because I was poking my nose into other people's business, and Father said I shouldn't investigate who killed Wellington. And the policeman gave me a caution, and if I get into trouble again, it will be a lot worse because of the caution." Then the Indian lady behind the counter said to Miss Alexander, "Can I help you?" And Miss Alexander said she'd like a pint of milk and a packet of Jaffa cakes, and I went out of the shop. When I was outside the shop, I saw that Miss Alexander's Dash Hund was sitting on the pavement. He was wearing a little coat made out of tartan material, which is Scottish and Czech. She had tied its lid to the drain pipe next to the door. I like dogs, so I bent down and I said hello to her dog, and it licked my hand. Its tongue was raw and wet, and it liked the smell on my trousers and started sniffing them. Then Miss Alexander came outside and said, "His name is Ivor." I didn't say anything. And Miss Alexander said, "You're very shy, aren't you, Christopher?" And I said, "I'm not allowed to talk to you." And she said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to tell the police, and I'm not going to tell your father because there's nothing wrong with having a chat. Having a chat is just being friendly, isn't it? I said, I can't do chatting. Then she said, do you like computers? And I said, yes, I like computers. I have a computer at home in my bedroom. And she said, I know, I can see you sitting at your computer in your bedroom sometimes when I look across the street. Then she untied Ivor's lead from the drainpipe. I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't want to get into trouble. Then I thought that this was a super good day and something special hadn't happened yet, so it was possible that talking to Miss Alexander was the special thing that was going to happen. And I thought that she might tell me something about Wellington or about Mr. Shears without me asking her, so that wouldn't be breaking my promise. So I said, and I like maths and looking after Toby, and also I like outer space and I like being on my own. And she said, I bet you're very good at maths, aren't you? And I said, I am. I'm going to do my A-level maths next month, and I'm going to get an A grade. And Miss Alexander said, really? A-level maths? I replied, yes, I don't tell lies. And she said, I apologize, I didn't mean to suggest that you were lying. I just wondered if I heard you correctly. I'm a little deaf sometimes. And I said, I remember you told me. And then I said, I'm the first person to do an A-level from my school because it's a special school. And she said, well, I'm very impressed and I hope you do get an A. And I said, I will. Then she said, and the other thing I know about you is that your favorite color is not yellow. And I said, no, and it's not brown either. My favorite color is red and metal color. Then Ivor did a poo and Miss Alexander picked it up with her hand inside the little plastic bag, and then she turned the plastic bag inside out and tied the knot in the top so that the poo was all sealed up and she didn't touch the poo with her hands. And then I did some reasoning. I reasoned that father had only made me do a promise about 5 things, which were 1. Not to mention Mr. Cheers' name in our house. 2. Not to go asking Miss Cheers about who killed that bloody dog. 3. Not to go asking anyone about who killed that bloody dog. 4. Not to go trespassing in other people's gardens. And 5. To stop this ridiculous, bloody detective game. And asking about Mr. Cheers wasn't any of these things. And if you are a detective, you have to take risks, and this was a super good day, which meant it was a good day for taking risks. So I said, do you know Mr. Cheers? Which was like chatting. And Miss Alexander said, not really, no. I mean, I know him well enough to say hello and talk to a little in the street, but I didn't know much about him. I think he worked in a bank, the National Westminster, in town. And I said, Father says that he is an evil man. Do you know why he said that? Is Mr. Cheers an evil man? And Miss Alexander said, why are you asking me about Mr. Cheers, Christopher? And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be investigating Wellington's murder, and that was the reason I was asking about Mr. Cheers. But Mrs. Alexander said, is this about Wellington? And I nodded, because that didn't count as being a detective. Miss Alexander didn't say anything. She walked to the little red box on a pole next to the gate to the park, and she put Ivor's poo into the box, which was a brown thing inside the red thing, which made my head feel funny, so I didn't look. Then she walked back to me. She sucked in a big breath and said, perhaps it will be best not to talk about these things, Christopher. And I asked, why not? And she said, because... Then she stopped and decided to start saying a different sentence. Because maybe your father is right and you shouldn't go around asking questions about this. And I asked why. And she said, because obviously he is going to find it quite upsetting. And I said, why is he going to find it upsetting? Then she sucked in another big breath and said, because I think you know why your father doesn't like Mr. Cheers very much. Then I said, did Mr. Cheers kill Mother? And Miss Alexander said, kill her. And I said, yes, did he kill Mother? And Miss Alexander said, no. Of course he didn't kill your mother. And I said, but did he give her stress so that she died of a heart attack? And Miss Alexander said, I honestly don't know what you're talking about, Christopher. And I said, or did he hurt her so that she had to go into hospital? And Miss Alexander said, did she have to go into a hospital? And I said, yes. And it wasn't very serious at first, but she had a heart attack when she was in a hospital. And Miss Alexander said, oh my goodness. And I said, and she died. And Miss Alexander said, oh my goodness, again. And then she said, oh Christopher, I'm so sorry, I never realized. Then I asked her, why did you say, I think you know why your father doesn't like Mr. Cheers very much. Miss Alexander put her hand over her mouth and said, oh dear, dear, dear. But she didn't answer my question. So I asked her the same question again, because in a murder mystery novel, when someone doesn't want to answer a question, it is because they are trying to keep a secret or trying to stop someone getting into trouble, which means that the answers to those questions are the most important answers of all, and that is why the detective has to put that person under pressure. But Miss Alexander still didn't answer. Instead, she asked me a question. She said, so you don't know? And I said, don't know what? She replied, Christopher, look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this. Then she said, perhaps we should take a little walk in the park together. This is not the place to be talking about this kind of thing. I was nervous. I did not know Miss Alexander. I knew that she was an old lady and that she liked dogs, but she was a stranger, and I never go into the park on my own because it is dangerous, and people inject drugs behind the public toilets in the corner. I wanted to go home and go up to my room and feed Toby and practice some maths. But I was excited too, because I thought she might tell me a secret, and the secret might be about who killed Wellington, or about Mr. Cheers, and if she did that, I might have more evidence against him, or be able to exclude him from my investigations. So because it was a super good day, I decided to walk into the park with Miss Alexander, even though it scared me. When we were inside the park, Miss Alexander stopped walking and said, I'm going to say something to you, and you must promise not to tell your father that I told you this. I asked why, and she said, I shouldn't have said what I said, and if I don't explain, you will carry on wondering what I meant, and you might ask your father, and I don't want you to do that because I don't want you to upset him, so I'm going to explain why I said what I said. But before I do that, you have to promise not to tell anyone I said this to you. I asked why, and she said, Christopher, please, just trust me. And I said, I promise, because if Miss Alexander told me who killed Wellington, or she told me that Mr. Shears had already killed Mother, I could still go to the police and tell them, because you are allowed to break a promise if someone has committed a crime and you know about it. And Miss Alexander said, your mother, before she died, was very good friends with Mr. Cheers. And I said, I know. And she said, no, Christopher, I'm not sure that you do. I mean, that they were very good friends. Very, very good friends. I thought about this for a while and said, do you mean that they were doing sex? And Miss Alexander said, yes, Christopher, that is what I mean. Then she didn't say anything for about 30 seconds. Then she said, I'm sorry, Christopher, I really didn't mean to say anything that was going to upset you, but I wanted to explain why I said what I said. You see, I thought you knew. That's why your father thinks that Mr. Cheers is an evil man. And that will be why he doesn't want you going around talking to people about Mr. Cheers, because that will bring back bad memories. And I said, was that why Mr. Cheers left Miss Cheers? Because he was doing sex with someone else when he was married to Miss Cheers? And Miss Alexander said, yes, I expect so. Then she said, I'm sorry, Christopher, I really am. And I said, I think I should go now. And she said, are you okay, Christopher? And I said, I'm scared of being in the park with you because you are a stranger. And she said, I'm not a stranger, Christopher, I'm a friend. And I said, I'm going to go home now. And she said, if you want to talk about this, you can come and see me anytime you want. You only have to knock on my door. And I said, okay. And she said, Christopher? And I said, what? And she said, you won't tell your father about this conversation, will you? And I said, no, I promised. And she said, you go home and remember what I said, anytime. Then I went home. Chapter 101. Mr. Jevons said that I liked maths because it was safe. He said I liked maths because it meant solving problems, and these problems were difficult and interesting, but there was always a straightforward answer at the end. And what he meant was that maths wasn't like life, because in life there are no straightforward answers at the end. I know he meant this because this is what he said. This is because Mr. Jevons doesn't understand numbers. Here is a famous story called the Monty Hall problem. Okay, which I have included in this book because it illustrates what I mean. Okay, let's read about it. I do know that problem, but let's read about it nonetheless. There used to be a column called Ask Marilyn in a magazine called Parade in America, and this column was written by Marilyn Vos Savant. And in the magazine it said that she had the highest IQ in the world in the Guinness Book of World Records Hall of Fame. And in the column she answered maths questions sent in by readers. And in September 1990, this question was sent in by Craig F. Whittaker of Columbia, Maryland. But it is not what is called a direct quote, because they have made it simpler and easier to understand. You are on a game show on television, and this game show, the idea is to win a car as prize. The game show host shows you 3 doors. He says that there is a car behind one of the doors, and there are goats behind the other 2 doors. He asks you to pick a door. You pick a door, but the door is not opened. Then the game show host opens one of the doors you didn't pick to show a goat, because he knows what is behind the doors. Then he says that you have one final chance to change your mind before the doors are opened and you get a car or a goat. So he asks you if you want to change your mind and pick the other unopened door instead. What should you do? And I know that you just have to change your mind and pick the other door, because that increases the probability of winning the game. But let's read. Marilyn Vos Savant said that you should always change and pick the final door, because the chances are 2 in 3 that there will be a car behind the door. But if you use your intuition, you think that chance is 50-50, because you think there is an equal chance that the car is behind any door. Lots of people wrote to the magazine to say that Marilyn Vos Savant was wrong, even when she explained very carefully why she was right. 92% of the letters she got about the problem said that she was wrong, and lots of these were from mathematicians and scientists. Here are some of the things that they said. I am very concerned with the general public's lack of mathematical skills. Please help by confessing your error. Robert Sachs, PhD, George Mason University. There is enough mathematical illiteracy in the world, and we don't need the world's highest IQ propagating more. Shame. Scott Smith, PhD, University of Florida. I am in shock that after being corrected by at least 3 mathematicians, you still do not see your mistake. Kent Ford, Dickinson State University. I'm sure you will receive many letters from high school and college students. Perhaps you should keep a few addresses for help with future columns. W. Robert Smith, PhD, Georgia State University. You are utterly incorrect. How many irate mathematicians are needed to get you to change your mind? E. Ray Bobo, PhD, Georgetown University. If all those PhD were wrong, the country would be in very serious trouble. Everett Harman, PhD, U.S. Army Research Institute. But Marilyn Vos Savant was right. And here are 2 ways you can show this. Firstly, you can do it by maths like this. Let the doors be called X, Y, and Z. Let C be the event that the car is behind the door, and so on. Let H be the event that the host opens door X, and so on. Supposing that you choose door X, the possibility that you win a car if you then switch your choice is given by the following formula. think that this shouldn't matter much. I'm sorry that you can't see it clearly. The second way you can work it out is by making a picture of all the possible outcomes. That's it's simpler. Like this. You are asked to choose a door, you choose the door with the goat behind it, with the goat, you choose the one with the car, and of course. So all the possibilities are drawn in the tree, right? And then you say, so if you change 2 times out of 3 you get the car, and if you stick you only get the car 1 time out of 3. And this shows that intuition can sometimes get things wrong, and intuition is what people use in life to make decisions, but logic can help you work out the right answers. It also shows that Mr. Jevons was wrong and numbers are sometimes very complicated and not very straightforward at all, and that is why I like the Monty Hall problem. Chapter 103. When I got home, Rodri was there. Rodri is the man who works for father, helping him do heating, maintenance and boiler repair. And he sometimes comes round to the house in the evening to drink beer with father and watch the television and have a conversation. Rodri was wearing a pair of white dungarees which had dirty marks all over them, and he had a gold ring on the middle finger of his left hand, and he smelt of something I do not know the name of, which father often smells of when he comes home from work. I put my licorice laces and my Milky Bar in my special food box on the shelf, which father is not allowed to touch because it's mine. Then father said, and what have you been up to, young man? And I said, I went to the shop to get some licorice laces and a Milky Bar. And he said, you were a long time. And I said, I talked to Miss Alexander's dog outside the shop. And I stroked him and he sniffed my trousers, which was another white lie. Then Rodri said to me, God, you do get the 3rd degree, don't you? But I didn't know what the 3rd degree was. And he said, so how are you doing, Captain? And I said, I'm doing very well, thank you, which is what you're meant to say. And he said, what's 251 times 864? And I thought about this and said, 260,864, because it was really easy sum, because you just multiply 864 by 1000, which is 864,000, then you divide it by 4, which is 260,000, and that's 250 by 864. Then you just add another 864 onto it to get 251 by 864, and that's 260,864. And I said, is that right? And he said, I haven't got a bloody clue. And he laughed. I don't like it when Rodri laughs at me. Rodri laughs at me a lot. Father says it is being friendly. Then father said, I'll stick one of those gobi aloo saag things in the oven for you, okay? This is because I like Indian food, because it has a strong taste, but gobi aloo saag is yellow, so I put red food coloring into it before I eat it. And I keep a little plastic bottle of this in my special food box. And I said, okay. And Rodri said, so it looks like Parky stitched them up then. But this was to father, not to me. And father said, well, those circuit boards look like they come out of the bloody ark. And Rodri said, you going to tell them? And father said, what's the point? They're hardly going to take him to court, are they? And Rodri said, that will be the day. And father said, best to let sleeping dogs lie, I reckon. Then I went into the garden. Siobhan said that when you're writing a book, you have to include some descriptions of things. I said that I could take photographs and put them in the book, but she said the idea of a book was to describe things using words so that people could read them and make a picture in their own head. And she said it was best to describe things that were interesting or different. She also said that I should describe people in the story by mentioning 1 or 2 details about them, so that people could make a picture of them in their head, which is why I wrote about Mr. Jevons' shoes with all the holes in them, and the policeman who looked as if he had 2 mice in his nose, and the thing Rodri smelled out of, but I didn't know the name for. So I decided to do a description of the garden, but the garden wasn't very interesting or different. It was just a garden with grass and shed and the clothesline. But the sky was interesting and different because usually skies look boring because they are all blue or all gray or all covered in one pattern of clouds, and they don't look like they are hundreds of miles above your head. They look like someone might have painted them on a big roof, but this sky had lots of different types of clouds in it at different heights, so you could see how big it was, and this made it look enormous. Furthest away in the sky were lots of little white clouds which looked like fish scales or sand dunes which had a very regular pattern. Then, next furthest away on the west were some big clouds which were colored, slightly arranged because it was nearly evening and the sun was going down. Then, closest to the ground was a huge cloud which was colored gray because it was a rain cloud. And it was a big pointy shape and it looked like this. That's a cloud. And when I looked at it for a long time, I could see it moving very slowly, and it was like an alien spaceship hundreds of kilometers long, like a Dune or Blake 7 or Close Encounters of the Third Kind, except that it wasn't made of solid material. It was made of droplets of condensated water vapor, which is what clouds are made of, and it could have been an alien spaceship. People think that alien spaceships will be solid, made of metal and have lights all over them and have slowly through the sky, because this is how we'll build a spaceship if we were able to build one that big. But aliens, if they exist, will probably be very different from us. They might look like big slugs, or be flat array refractions, or they might be bigger than planets, or they might not have bodies at all. They might just be information like in a computer, and their spaceships might look like clouds or be made up of unconnected objects like dusts or leaves. Then I listened to the sounds in the garden and I could hear a bird singing, and I could hear traffic noise which was like the surf on a beach, and I could hear someone playing music somewhere and children shouting. And in between these noises, if I listened very carefully and stood completely still, I could hear a tiny whining noise inside my ears and the air going in and out of my nose. Then I sniffed the air to see if I could see what the air in the garden smelled like, but I couldn't smell anything. It smelled of nothing, and this was interesting too. Then I went inside and fed Dobby. Wow, I think that I've read a lot now. I'm in chapter 107, near the middle of the book, but I think I'm going to stop there because I can't read out loud anymore. I have to rest a little. So thank you very much for joining, and I hope to continue reading maybe in some hours or tomorrow. So see you. Thank you.